The cane came down like it had 1,000 times before, wood against flesh. The sound echoed through the Holmby Hills mansion, 20 rooms, but somehow never enough space to escape that sound. Gary Crosby was 18 years old, just shy of his birthday. He had broken curfew, 2 minutes late, maybe 5. The details didn't matter. What mattered was that Bing Crosby had rules, and Bing Crosby's rules were not negotiable. But this time, something was different. As the cane swung toward him, Gary's hand shot out, caught it midair. His father's eyes widened, surprise, then anger. Gary twisted the cane from his father's grip, and then, with a strength born from 18 years of accumulated rage and pain, he snapped it over his knee. The crack was deafening. 2 pieces of wood fell to the floor, and in that silence, Gary looked his father in the eyes and said words that should have been said years ago. "If you ever touch me again, I'll kill you." Bing Crosby stood there, the most famous man in the world, the voice of Christmas, the consummate professional who never lost his composure on stage, on screen, or in public, and he said nothing. No anger, no shock, no reaction at all. He just stood there perfectly calm, as if his eldest son hadn't just threatened his life, as if the cane he'd used to beat his children for years wasn't lying broken at his feet. Gary would later say, "I was a physical, emotional, mental wreck, and he was fine." He still won, but nobody knew what happened in that room, not for decades, because Bing Crosby was very good at keeping secrets, and the 2 men who knew the truth, Gary's brothers Dennis and Philip, who witnessed the confrontation, would carry it differently. One would defend their father until his death. The other would take his own life, unable to escape the shadow of that house. To understand what happened that night, why Gary broke, why Bing didn't react, why the confrontation was buried for decades, we need to go back to when Harry Lillis Crosby was building the most carefully constructed image in Hollywood history. Because Bing Crosby wasn't just a singer, he was an idea, a symbol of American fatherhood, wholesome, loving, perfect, and that image was so powerful that even his own sons believed it. For a while, Harry Lillis Crosby was born in 1903, a stuttering boy from Tacoma, insecure, anxious. His own father was distant, his mother strict and religious. Affection was rare, discipline was constant. He learned early, emotions were weaknesses, vulnerability was failure, control was everything. When he became Bing, the nickname from a comic strip, the persona he built note by note, smile by smile, he perfected that control. On stage, he was relaxed, effortless, warm. Off stage, he was ice. In 1930, he married Dixie Lee. She was more famous than him then. The headlines got his name wrong. Well-known Fox movie star marries Bing Crosby. They had 4 sons. Gary in 1933, twins Dennis and Philip in 1934, Lindsay in 1938, and Bing's career exploded. Radio, records, movies. By 1935, he was the most popular man in America, but popularity demands perfection, and Bing Crosby was determined to be perfect. His career, his image, his family, especially his family. The mansion in Holmby Hills had 20 rooms, servants, luxury, everything a child could want, except warmth. The rules were posted, written down, non-negotiable, curfews, weigh-ins, behavior standards, academic expectations, social conduct. Gary's father came home at 6 o'clock, and by 6:05 he'd heard the news of infractions, then administered beatings with a belt until blood appeared. The beatings were methodical, not angry. That was the most terrifying part. Bing wasn't enraged. He was calm, systematic, professional. Gary recalls hoping he'd bleed early to make the beating stop sooner. Dixie, their mother, was drowning. Alcoholism consumed her. She couldn't protect them. Sometimes she was part of the problem. Gary remembered one instance. Philip hid his breakfast under the rug. Dixie made him eat it. Dirt, hairs, and all. The boys worshipped their father, what he thought was everything. But he was gone constantly, months on location, weeks on tour. When he returned, it was like a stranger walking through the door, a stranger with rules and expectations and a belt with metal studs. Bing called Gary bucket butt and satchel ass in public, particularly in front of his friends. Gary was heavier than his brothers. Bing was obsessed with his weight. Weekly weigh-ins. If Gary gained a pound, he got beaten. The boys were sent to a strict Jesuit boarding school south of San Francisco. All except Philip, Bing's favorite. Philip stayed home. Even siblings in the same house lived different realities. Gary was 18, almost an adult. But in Bing's house, age didn't matter. Rules mattered. He was out with friends, Hollywood kids, children of stars. They were at a party, having fun, being young. Gary checked his watch. 11:58 p.m. His curfew was midnight. He left immediately, raced home. He walked through the door at 12:02 a.m., 2 minutes late. According to Judy Lewis, daughter of Loretta Young and Clark Gable and Gary's friend, Bing canceled Gary's 18th birthday party as punishment for being minutes late for curfew. Jack Haley Jr.'s parents threw Gary a party instead. But the canceled party was just the beginning. That night or shortly after, Bing came for Gary with the cane. By then, the belt had been replaced. Bing held the cane like a baseball bat when preparing to strike. Gary had endured 18 years of this. 18 years of beatings, humiliation, impossible standards. 18 years of being told he wasn't good enough, thin enough, disciplined enough. 18 years of watching his father smile for the world while terrorizing his children. Something snapped. As Bing attempted to hit Gary with the cane, Gary snatched it and broke it over his knee. The sound echoed through the house. Dennis and Philip were there, watching, frozen. Gary told his father he'd kill him if he ever hit him again. The words hung in the air, a threat, a boundary, a line finally drawn, and Bing showed no perceptible reaction. No anger, no fear, no acknowledgement at all. He simply stood there, calm, collected, as if his son hadn't just destroyed his weapon and threatened his life. Gary said, "I was a physical, emotional, mental wreck and he was fine." That's what broke Gary's heart more than anything. Not the beatings, not the humiliation, the indifference, the realization that even in this moment, this explosion of years of pain, his father felt nothing, or showed nothing, which might be worse. Dennis and Philip witnessed it. Two brothers, two completely different takeaways. Dennis would fluctuate between defending and criticizing their father. Eventually, he would struggle with alcoholism, depression, failed marriages. In 1991, he would shoot himself with a shotgun. Philip would become Bing's defender. Years later, he'd say Gary was a liar, that their father never beat them black and blue, that they never got a whack they didn't deserve, that their father was a hero. Same house, same father, different truths, or different ways of surviving the same truth. After the confrontation, the beating stopped. Gary was too big now, too dangerous. Bing never touched him again, but Gary felt his father's influence carried on into his music career, saying he still won. The control didn't need physical violence anymore. It was in Gary's head, in his brothers' heads, in the way they all struggled with alcohol, depression, self-destruction. The four Crosby boys tried to follow their father's footsteps. They formed a singing group, appeared on his shows, tried to be like him, but they were ghosts, haunting their own lives. Gary had a brief career, some success, a few film roles, a recurring role on Adam 12, but mostly he drank. Bar fights, no shows, unreliable. In 1959, the brothers' nightclub act broke up after a brawl in a Montreal dressing room. Lindsay struggled silently. In 1989, at age 51, drowning in debt and depression, he shot himself in the head with a rifle. Dennis followed 2 years later, May 4th, 1991. Shotgun. He was 56. Gary died of lung cancer in 1995 at 62. He was about to marry his fourth wife when he got the diagnosis. Philip lived until 2004. Heart attack at 69. He defended his father until the end. 6 years after Bing's death, Gary published Going My Own Way, a Mommy Dearest-style memoir detailing the abuse. The world was shocked. Bing Crosby, the voice of Christmas, the perfect father who won multiple Father of the Year awards. The book revealed Gary's life growing up in a 20-room Hollywood house of terror, included silent meals, harsh summers at his dad's Nevada ranch, constant goading to lose weight, and regular physical beatings. The family fractured. Philip called Gary a liar. Mary, their half-sister from Bing's second marriage, said Gary exaggerated for money, though Mary later apologized, saying Gary told her publishers had told him, "The worse it was, the more books will sell." Bob Crosby, Bing's brother, said Bing was a disciplinarian and that's how they were all raised. Lindsay supported Gary's claims before his death, saying it was something Gary had to do. Dennis admitted Gary got the first licking and we got the second. But the most revealing thing Gary ever said wasn't in the book. It was years later. In an interview, Gary clarified that Bing was like a lot of fathers of that time. He was not out to be vicious, to beat children for his kicks. Even after everything, Gary was still trying to understand, still trying to find a way to forgive, or at least to explain. Dennis and Philip were there that night. They saw Gary break the cane, heard the threat, watched their father's non-reaction, and they processed it completely differently. Philip chose loyalty, chose to remember the good, chose to believe their father was strict but fair, that they deserved what they got, that Gary was exaggerating. Maybe Philip needed to believe that. Maybe defending Bing was the only way Philip could defend himself, the favorite son who got to stay home while his brothers were sent away. Dennis chose something more complicated. He acknowledged the abuse but couldn't fully condemn it. He drank, married and divorced 4 times, struggled with depression, and eventually, like Lindsay, he chose to end it. 2 men, same moment, same father, 2 completely different ways of carrying the weight. And Gary? Gary chose truth, or his version of it. He wrote the book, told the world, and was called a liar, a greedy opportunist, a whining crybaby by his own brother. But he also said this: "I think I learned from my father how not to raise a kid." Maybe that was the point. Maybe breaking the cane wasn't just about stopping the beatings. Maybe it was about breaking the cycle. Bing Crosby died on October 14, 1977. Heart attack on a golf course in Spain. He was 74. When Gary learned of his father's death, he was playing tennis at a Los Angeles club. After a brief pause when told the news, he continued with his game. No tears, no collapse, just a pause, and then back to tennis. Maybe Gary had mourned his father years ago. Maybe he mourned him every time the cane came down. Maybe there was nothing left to mourn. Bing's second wife, Catherine Grant, said he was a better father to their 3 children. He was older, retired, actually present. Mary Crosby said, "The greatest gift we had was that he was there. But that doesn't erase the first 4 sons. It doesn't erase the confrontation, the broken cane, the blank stare." Bing Crosby wanted perfection, perfect career, perfect image, perfect family. And in pursuing that perfection, he destroyed the family he was trying to perfect. The night Gary confronted him, the night Gary broke the cane and threatened to kill him, Bing's lack of reaction wasn't strength. It was emptiness. It was a man so disconnected from his own emotions, so committed to control, that even his son's pain couldn't crack the facade. Gary said he was fine, while Gary himself was a physical, emotional, mental wreck. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not that Bing hurt his sons, but that he was so numb, so controlled, so perfect he couldn't even feel it when they finally broke. Gary Crosby tried to be different. He had a stepson. He talked to him, listened, balanced criticism with praise, never used a belt, never drew blood. Gary said of raising his stepson, "I always gave him a chance to tell his side of the story when it appeared he had misbehaved. I sometimes punished him, but only by spanking. I criticized him, but I always balanced it out with about as equal amount of praise as criticism." The cycle was broken, at least in that one small way, but Gary still struggled. Alcoholism, failed marriages, heart surgery, and eventually, cancer. When he died in 1995, 2 months after diagnosis, did he think about that night? The cane breaking over his knee, his father's blank stare. Did he ever wonder what would have happened if Bing had reacted? If Bing had apologized? If Bing had shown even once that he felt something? We'll never know. But we know this. The 2 men beside Gary that night, Dennis and Philip, both carried that moment for the rest of their lives. One defended it. One was destroyed by it. And Gary? Gary told the truth about it and was called a liar. Maybe that's the real shock. Not Bing's non-reaction, but the world's. The way people couldn't accept that their perfect father was a myth. The way they needed Bing to be who they thought he was, more than they needed to believe Gary's pain. The cane broke that night, but so did something in all 4 boys, and no amount of white Christmas could ever put it back together.